The hero of your own life. Welcome to Women of Impact. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to start and kick this off with right from the beginning, starting your own business. And I've got a great quote from you, girl. The number one thing that catches out a lot of women is self-belief and confidence. I think it's one of those things we've never going to completely be amazing at, and we always have to keep working on it. But especially in the beginning, business is really slow sometimes, and if you don't have confidence and self-belief in the beginning, you're setting yourself up to fail, because not everyone's going to believe in you and not everyone has to. You might join a community that really has your back and supports you, but at the end of the day, when you're an entrepreneur, you're the only one that's responsible for what you're doing, and when it gets hard, you can start doubting yourself. You can get those negative voices in your head, and it stops a lot of women from getting from A to B. Ooh, so talk to me about that. Talk to me about believing in yourself. Did you have belief in yourself when you first started?
No, I mean, when I first started entrepreneurship, I was 13. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I had this drive and I wanted to create. And it really came to a point for me when I was just finishing my degree. I did business management and I got offered what looked like the dream corporate job. It was what everyone in my class was like really driving towards. So when I got it, I felt like I should have felt happier than I actually did. And for me, I knew, okay, like if I'm going to start a business, I'm going to get serious. Like I have rent to pay for, I have food to put on the table, like I need to make this work. So I give myself just 12 months from, okay, this idea, if I can get it off the ground before I go to this job, then perfect. I'm all set. And if I don't, I'll go and work for them. And so many people around me were saying, you'd be crazy if you didn't go and take this job. You know, it's going to pay off your student debt. It's everything you wanted. You get to move to London. Like, it's going to be amazing. You have to take it. It's such a good opportunity. And I remember just really having this belief that you can do this, you really, really can. And I know if I didn't have that self-belief, I would have went with what people were telling me to do. And so I really pushed forward, but there were so many times throughout that I wanted to give up, because it isn't just like you make the decision and you have the light bulb moment and you go up. Like, it's very much a roller coaster, and whether it's, you know, not making money or not being able to cope with the stress, like having to pull late nights, whatever it is, there are so many times that you want to give up, and you have to believe in yourself and that what you're doing is important. But I won't say I'm the most confident person in the world. I have weeks where I'm like, oh my God, I'm killing it, I'm amazing, I'm such a boss babe. And then I have weeks where I'm just like, when I don't look after myself and I haven't had sleep and I'm not eating well, that's when my other things come up and I don't feel confident and I don't feel myself. But when I'm in those weeks where, like, taking my supplements, I'm sleeping, I'm doing yoga, I feel really unstoppable.
So all of that makes a difference to how you see yourself.
Yeah, and really, like, sometimes when I feel like at my least confident, I've made the most money. And it's crazy, because you can, your subconscious mind can be funny. Like, if it wants to tell you that it doesn't believe in you, it'll be like, well, that money was a fluke. Or like, it'll always have, but I think really just the foundations are looking after yourself and like being in a good mental frame of mind and physically feeling good. Then, you know, you can drown out that voice being like, listen, it's not a fluke, I'm really good at what I do, and like speak to it that way.
Yeah. But so you've always believed from a very young age that you were born entrepreneur. I, on the other hand, are the complete opposite. I never saw myself as being an entrepreneur. I think that you've got two types. You're either born or you're made. I feel like I'm a made entrepreneur. And so I never had that conviction personally on that, like, okay, if you start a business, because that was a deep passion when it was never like that for me. What about you, Amy? Do you feel like you're a born entrepreneur or a made entrepreneur? And then how do you deal with that belief system in yourself when maybe you have other people telling you it's not possible?
Well, I came from a family of entrepreneurs. Okay. So we've all heard the saying, if you can see it, you believe it. Mm-hmm. So I had incredible role models, my grandfather, my uncle, both of my parents. And so I think I felt it was in my blood, honestly, and that if I wasn't an entrepreneur, that would be surprising. So yes, I worked in advertising, and then I ran the marketing and PR for New York's Olympic bid, which is when I first started working with athletes. Right. And then I was at Martha Stewart. And in each of those experiences, I had a very entrepreneurial experience. Even in the context of working for a big company, you can still function as an entrepreneur. You can still approach things in an entrepreneurial way. And I think I always did. And whether that was me wanting to get as much experience as possible so that someday when I started my business, I could really kill it. But I knew I wanted to have some control over my own destiny, and I wanted to feel like I could pursue these different ideas that I was experiencing constantly. Like I feel like I literally sit around birthing ideas left and right. And sometimes my challenge is just to figure out how to move forward and get one thing done. And so the good news is about my business as a PR agency, mostly, we're constantly changing and evolving. The landscape's changing and evolving so much. So I get to feel like I'm reinventing on a constant basis, which is, now I know, one of the things that really motivates me. So I think if you're an entrepreneur, you need to learn to love that, because whether you're solely focused on one thing and doing it well, or whether you have a dozen clients the way we do and you're constantly thinking about how to solve each of their different problems, you're still always going to have things coming at you that you never anticipated or ever wanted every day. And that, I think that defines entrepreneurship. So even just sometimes feeling like I have access to new ideas and new approaches is what I need to get out of my own head, because that's really all it is. The insecurity is just about being in our own head. The self-doubt is just about allowing the bad voice to overcome the good voice. It's not like anything real has changed on those days, you know? I feel like one of the big things with entrepreneurship in general is sometimes you're faced with this crossroads where it seems like everything is going wrong at exactly the same time, and it must be a sign from the universe that you need to do something else. It's time to just close it off, you know, like, let's try something new. And you have a choice at those moments. You can either go, yeah, this is a total disaster and I think it's time for something new. I'm sick of it. I don't want to deal with this anymore. The signs are very clear. Or you can dig deep and go, you know what? Thank you. I see all these challenges and I'm totally equipped to handle them. And I'm personally committed to fixing these problems. It's about recommitting constantly. So the minute you recommit and you start taking some of the steps to sort out the bazillion challenges ahead, then the flow state returns.
Yeah. Whether you're recommitting or just the initial commitment, how do you know whether it's the right thing, or how do you guys make that decision? Because there are some moments, like I mentioned in the intro, there are businesses I've started that I knew I either hated or this isn't working, and you have to pivot. So how do you know, or what do you guys do to assess whether this is a pivot moment, or this is, okay, I'm all in, I need to lean in, I need to learn from my mistakes, I need to get better because I just failed, so I need to improve, or walk away? And this is actually a great question for you, because I know recently you started your brand, which was amazing, and you've had problems. So how are you assessing right now in real time whether you go back to it, you get, you know, different manufacturer, you get a different partner, or do you just say, no, I'm going to shelf it and I'm going to start something else?
I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I've been facing, actually, because, you know, I also have just so many different ideas that come up, and there's so many areas of interest of things I want to pursue and work on, and it's more, is this the right project for me uniquely to deliver to this world at this time? And that's something I have to ask myself and really think through, because, you know, there is that doubt, and it's like distinguishing between, is this the voice of fear, or is this the voice and direction of intuition and like alignment, right? And I have to dig deep and ask myself that and be really honest with myself, because I think it's so easy to rationalize and to justify and logically come to whatever conclusion you want to come to. But when you're being really true with yourself, it's like, is this the thing that really is in full alignment with my purpose, my interests, my skill set? And is this something that I really could do, you know, in the worst of times as well? And if those answers, I think, aren't all yes, then it's going to be very challenging to keep pursuing that business, you know. And there's a lot of daily doubts and back and forths that I have with myself. And I think part of it too is just allowing yourself the space to do that and not judging yourself. I think especially for high achievers and people who just are very goal oriented, it's like, if I'm not executing on my giant list of things and hitting these milestones, which literally was my job in these big companies, was to drive an entire team forward towards these things. And I hold that standard for myself. So when I'm working on my own projects, I'm like, if I'm not achieving X, Y, Z at this time frame, at this rate, and delivering at this quality, then that negative voice starts spinning up, and I have to find a way to, you know, manage that and make it be productive versus destructive. And that's a challenge. It's a daily challenge for sure.
Yeah. I actually heard something that you said, Natalie, where you said you now set goals and then you double them. Talk to me, because I find that fascinating, because there's two schools of thoughts that I find in business, where some people, whether you're starting out or you're halfway through your company, you're just trying to build, it's setting goals, setting those markers. And I don't like people setting goals, especially myself, so that I can reach them. Right, I do like to stretch, but some people say if you go too far, it's almost too grand and it disincentivizes you and then your team. Talk to me about setting those goals and how you handle them.
Yeah, so it first came about a couple of years ago when I was setting a launch goal for myself, and I was sitting across the dinner table from Stephen, my husband, and I was like, "This is my goal," and he was like, "Double it." I'm like, "What? Double it? Like, that's crazy." And he's like, "Well, what if you just tried? Like, I think you can achieve this, and I think you can do a lot more than you think you can. Just double it, just try. If it doesn't work, like, we'll never go with this theory ever again." I'm like, fine, challenge accepted, I can do this. And so I hit the goal, and I don't think I would have hit it had I not doubled it, because I think when I hit that goal midway through the launch, I would have just gone, done. And I would have sat back, and I think that's what I'd done previously. Because sometimes what I think you do when you set a goal is you do the things you know work. You rinse, repeat, especially when you've been in the same business for a while. You rinse, repeat, it works. But then if someone says double your goal, you're like, well, I'm going to have to do something very differently to I normally would. So what if I created a strategy where I rinse and repeat, but I also layer this on top, or I try this, and it's either going to be a big success and I'm going to hit the goal, or it's going to be a big failure and I won't.
Yeah. That was so cool. So when you started your company, Amy, how did you set up what that future looked like for, or did you? And also, did you do it when you were still at your nine to five, quote unquote, job? Because the one thing that I get asked all the time is, should I leave my current job? Should I take this chance? I've only given myself a year, like you said, Nat. Did you do any of that? And then if so, how did you maneuver through it?
Well, I've realized, for better or worse, I'm the type of person where a lot of stuff is happening here long before it happens in reality. And when I first was starting the business, I said, I want to build an agency focused on female athletes and women's sports, because I feel like it's an undertapped area. This was 13 years ago. No one's focused on that space. There's a shortage of great female role models. We all need to be out there making a change. And I envisioned building a mini IMG where we'd have the representation, marketing consulting, PR, content development, events, everything under one roof with synergies between all these areas. And everyone said, Amy, you're crazy. There's no money in women's sports. And by the way, they're right. I actually think it's good that I was as naive as I was, because I wouldn't have done it. But if anything, it made me want to do it more, because the more people who said that's crazy, the more I said, well, and that's sure, no one's doing it. And I'm confident there's some germ of something there. And even when I started the business, I had this kind of loose vision in my mind of how it would unfold, but it unfolded in a completely different fashion from what I imagined. So, of course, the representation stuff took off, and I was horrified, because I grew up in Los Angeles thinking the word agent was a bad word. And suddenly I was a sports agent. And even when I went to one of my high school reunions, people were literally astounded. They're like, you're working in sports and you're a sports agent? But the first 2 years, I got deep in this representation space, and I knew that wasn't where it was going to go in the end. And this whole health and wellness world, which is in some ways even more aligned with me personally, was exploding here. And so suddenly we started working with an organic snack bar and a vegan beauty brand and an eco water bottle, and all these things that enabled me to sort of see the world differently, that actually this women's sports piece of it was actually one thread of this much bigger opportunity. And I think that's a big part of starting a business, is seeing where the movement is. And if it weren't for that piece of it, I could certainly not be doing what I'm doing now. And I think we're still just in this emerging, who knows where it's going to go place, which is the exciting part, you know? And I think I'm wired like that, for better or worse.
Yeah. One thing I've actually noticed in researching you guys and sitting here with you is and meeting other female entrepreneurs or just entrepreneurs in general, it really kind of stems from what is a passion of yours? Like, what is that thing that you actually enjoy, or what would you use, right? So for you, it's like you saw that there was no product out there that you could do on the go. Same with Quest. It was like we were working out. My husband was going to work every day and he didn't really have anything to eat. He was like, the protein bars on the market were disgusting or they were full of sugar. It seems like it's so important that that's where people should start. Instead of chasing the money or something they think they should, like starting from the ground of what is the thing that I really love and then how can I make a business out of it. What do you guys think about that, and how does that reflect on what you guys did? How do you assess which is the right one to go, like which path to go down? Do you have any tips there?
So one approach that actually I use from my tech world that we use when we decide like what features to build next. So like, for example, if you're building, you know, the next video interface for Facebook Live, like, do you want to add a like button here or a, you know, share button there? Like those kinds of decisions, there's actually a framework around that, which is like, what's the expected impact? What's the level of effort? And what's the timeline and feasibility of actually doing it? So I kind of apply that framework to a lot of my other areas of life as well. Like, is this really in alignment? Is this doable within a certain time frame? Like, what's the expected impact and what do I really get out of it? And is this in alignment with the overall goal for what I'm trying to achieve? So I think using a framework to help you rank and prioritize keeps you disciplined, because you know you can get really easily distracted by a shiny object, and I find myself doing that a lot as well. And so going back to, you know, your guiding principles and your goal is really important, and just staying in alignment with the framework.
Do you ever find that those two, that you find a couple of things are like almost identical and they all have like, okay, they create impact and the timeline's roughly the same? What do you do in those situations?
Then you got to go with your gut,
Okay.
right? Like at that point, if everything on paper, if everything, you know, that rationally seems the same, then you kind of go with